Why so many reservoirs? The number of dams in the United States varies depending on how they are defined and who is counting. But according to the most recent data from the National Inventory of Dams, ENID, maintained by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, there are 92,075 dams across the country. Here is a breakdown of how those numbers look in practice. Key statistics. Total count, 92,075. As of the latest official federal inventory. Average age. The average age of a dam in the U.S. is about 61 years. Ownership. Approximately 65% are privately owned, while the rest are managed by federal, state or local governments. Primary uses. It might be surprising to learn that very few dams are actually built for power. In fact, less than 3% of U.S. dams produce hydroelectricity. Instead, they are mainly used for recreation, approximately 32.7%. Flood risk reduction, approximately 16.6%. Irrigation, approximately 8.3%. Water supply, approximately 5.6%. Safety and hazards. Dams are also categorized by their hazard potential, which refers to the impact of a potential failure, rather than the condition of the dam itself.
High hazard potential. Over 16,500 dams are classified this way, meaning a failure would likely result in the loss of human life. Significant hazard potential. Over 11,000 dams fall into this category, meaning failure would likely cause significant economic loss or environmental damage. Some organizations, like American Rivers, estimate there could be over 500,000 to 2 million smaller low-head dams or diversions that are not large enough to be included in the official national inventory. While the U.S. has a very precise count of over 92,000 dams, the global total is much harder to track because definitions of what constitutes a dam vary by country. However, based on the International Commission on Large Dams (ICOLD) and other global tracking databases, we can break the numbers down by scale. 1. Large dams. The official count. There are currently over 62,000 large dams in the world. Definition: to be large, a dam must generally be at least 15 meters, about 50 feet high, or between 5 and 15 meters high with a massive reservoir capacity. Top countries: China, 24, the world leader by a wide margin. United States, 9. To note, ICOLD only counts large dams, which is why this is lower than the 92,000 NID count mentioned earlier. India, 4. 500, Japan, 3, 100, 2. The total estimates small and large. If you include every small irrigation dam, local weir, and low-head dam, the number skyrockets. Most researchers estimate there are roughly 800,000 to 1 million dams worldwide. Small dams. These make up the vast majority of the global total, but often go unrecorded in international databases. Future growth. While many Western nations are currently focused on removing old dams, hundreds of major hydroelectric projects are currently under construction or planned in the Amazon, Congo, and Mekong River basins. Global comparison table. Why is there such a gap in the numbers? The missing dams are usually small, private structures used for farm ponds or local water diversion. Because they don't impact major downstream safety or international waterways, they rarely make it into official global registers. Even though they technically function as dams, it is a heavy reality that many of the world's most famous lakes are actually drowned landscapes. While there isn't a single database that tracks every single property ever submerged, we can look at the massive scale of displacement and the hundreds of ghost towns sitting at the bottom of reservoirs. 1. The human toll global. According to the World Commission on Dams, it is estimated that between 40 million and 80 million people have been displaced by dam construction worldwide over the last century. India and China account for the vast majority of this. In China alone, the Three Gorges Dam displaced over 1.3 million people and submerged 13 cities, 140 towns, and over 1,300 villages. In many cases, these weren't just properties, but ancestral lands held by indigenous and tribal communities for generations. 2. Submerged towns in the USA. In the United States, hundreds of towns were disincorporated, meaning they were legally dissolved before being flooded. Here are a few notable examples of underwater ghost towns. Lake Lanier in Georgia, once Oscarville, a once thriving black community. Quabbin Reservoir in Massachusetts, Dana, Enfield, Greenwich, and Prescott. Lake Mead, Nevada's T.D. Thomas remnants often reappeared during droughts. Lake Shasta, California, Kennett, Baird, Copper City, and more. Ashokan Reservoir, New York, 11 separate villages to provide water for NYC. 3. Private property vs. eminent domain. In the U.S., about 65% of all dams are privately owned, but the land for major reservoirs, like those owned by the TVA or the Bureau of Reclamation, was typically acquired through eminent domain. Forced sales. The government has the power to take private property for public use, like electricity or water supply, as long as they provide just compensation. The emotional cost. While owners are paid, the compensation rarely covers the loss of multi-generational farms, family cemeteries which often have to be moved, and community history. 4. What stays behind? When these towns were flooded, the buildings weren't always demolished. Depending on the era and the depth, the clean cut. In modern projects, towns are usually razed to the ground to prevent debris from floating into the dam's intakes. The silt-covered ruins, in older projects, entire foundations, roads, and stone bridges remain intact. Divers often find street layouts still visible under the silt. Cemeteries. This is often the most controversial part. While thousands of graves are relocated, many others, especially unmarked ones, are those of marginalized communities, are simply left beneath the water. It's a strange thought, but if you've ever spent a day on a popular recreational lake, there's a high probability you were floating directly over someone's former living room or a town's main street. When we talk about what is hidden under these reservoirs, we have to look past the physical towns and into the deeper history of the land, because rivers have always been the lifeblood of civilization. The fertile bottomlands that were flooded were often the most archaeologically and geologically significant areas on the continent. Here is what lies beneath the surface of many of those 92,000 plus dams. 1. The ancient highways and archaeological sites. Before modern cities existed, river valleys were the primary hubs for ancient civilizations. When a dam is built, it doesn't just flood a field. It submerges thousands of years of human history. Mound builder civilizations. In the American Southeast and Midwest, like the Tennessee Valley, hundreds of sacred earthen mounds and village sites built by Mississippian and Hopewell cultures were submerged. These were often complex astronomical observatories and burial sites. Petroglyphs and cave art. Thousands of ancient rock carvings and paintings located on canyon walls or river boulders are now permanently underwater. In the Grand Canyon and Glen Canyon areas, these sites are currently eroding due to the shifting water levels of the dams. Global lost cities during extreme droughts. Entire 3-4-year-old cities, like the Bronze Age city found in Iraq's Mosul Dam Reservoir, have temporarily resurfaced, revealing palaces and massive fortifications that were unknown to modern history. 2. Sacred indigenous lands. For many indigenous nations, the bottomlands weren't just property. They were the source of their medicine, food, and spiritual identity. The Pick Sloan Dams, Missouri River. These dams flooded over 200,000 acres of Sioux land. This destroyed 90% of the timber and fertile bottomland of the Standing Rock and Cheyenne River nations. Lost Falls. Famous landmarks like Chililo Falls on the Columbia River, a massive fishing and trading hub used for over 15,000 years, were completely silenced and submerged in 1957. 3. Drowned geological wonders. Some of the most beautiful natural features on Earth are currently paused under millions of tons of water. Glen Canyon. Before it became Lake Powell, Glen Canyon was described as the living grotto, filled with massive sandstone arches, hidden hanging gardens, and cathedral-like alcoves. Waterfalls. In South America, the Guara Falls, once the world's largest waterfall by volume, was completely submerged by the Itaipu Dam in 1982. The roar of the water could be heard for miles. Now, it is silent. 4. Alternative history and submerged infrastructure. There is a growing community of researchers who look at these massive public works projects with skepticism. They point out that many dams weren't built for power or irrigation, leading to theories about what might actually be down there. The historical amnesia theory. Some suggest that these dams were a way to reset the map, submerging evidence of a previous, more advanced civilization, often referred to in these circles as Tartarian or a melted world, that used the rivers for free energy or advanced transportation. Buried infrastructure. The theory suggests that the ornate stone bridges, tunnels, and star fort foundations found in many old cities were simply too difficult to demolish, so they were flooded under the guise of water management. The mud flood connection. Proponents of these theories often note that the sediment, silt that naturally builds up behind dams, mimics the mud flood layers found in old world basements, effectively sealing the past in a thick layer of muck. 5. Biological dead zones. Underneath the surface of many reservoirs lies a ghost forest. When the water rose, thousands of trees were submerged. Because there is no oxygen at the bottom of deep reservoirs, the wood doesn't rot. In some places, like the Cahora Bassa in Africa or certain lakes in the Pacific Northwest, there are entire standing forests underwater that have been dead for 50 years, but look exactly as they did the day they were flooded. In short, if you drain the world's reservoirs today, you wouldn't just find houses, you would find the lost library of human migration, ancient astronomical sites, and geological wonders that haven't seen the sun in nearly a century. The mystery of the unseen. While these photos show the structures that were left behind, they can't fully capture the lost history mentioned earlier, the ancient mounds, sacred indigenous sites, and unique geological formations that were never documented with modern photography before they were submerged. In many cases, what we see resurfacing is just the top layer of history. Deep beneath the silt of these 92,000 plus dams lies a vast, silent museum of human and natural history that remains largely inaccessible and hidden from the modern world.